We have a story out yesterday from the Wall Street Journal about kind of the general principles of algorithmic stablecoins and why, basically finance professionals look at them and they really predict disaster. I guess in a very brief summary, for those who aren't familiar, very broadly, the way UST and Luna work is that when UST drops below its $1 peg, then you can somebody's going to have to correct me here, but basically you swap between UST and Luna in such a way that it shrinks the supply of one or raises the supply of the other as needed to peg that $1 token. And the problem on one level is that there is no backing. There is no anything behind that. Of course, we're familiar with that from coins like Bitcoin, but this is slightly different. And now we have a really complicated situation with Luna buying Bitcoin, using its unbacked algorithmic stable, and then trying to work it into its backing system somehow, which is adding a whole big mess to the thing. And so the question is now, do algorithmic stablecoins work at all? We've seen Iron Finance collapse. We've seen other smaller collapses. Will, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this story is pretty old if you think of terms of the stablecoin, algorithmic stablecoin story. This has been something people have been trying to do for quite literally a decade now, going back to Bitcoin first and trying to build things on top of Bitcoin. And so the Wall Street Journal piece is nice to kind of tie up the current conversation about things, but this conversation is quite old. People have been trying to build things on top of Bitcoin, on top of Ethereum, on top of other layer ones, and create an asset that can actually be used, like a crypto asset that can be used in everyday life as a means of payment, because Bitcoin, Ether, your layer one of choice, is not used as a medium of exchange, and it won't be used as a medium of exchange for quite a while. Look at Bitcoin's transaction fees. They're tiny. It makes up less than 2% of block rewards over a month. Ethereum, it's too expensive to use it. You're not going to use it that way. So people have been looking at, how can I engineer something on top of this that I can use as a means of payment back and forth? Lightning just came out with a few different protocols to do this as well. Terra, obviously, there's so many different projects on top of Ethereum. And the problem with them all is that you are bringing two things together that don't work together. And that is crypto assets and the crypto engineering and the math behind it, and then the meat space. And oftentimes you have to make compromises, and those compromises are weak points, and those weak points fail. I think March 2020 was the best example of this, where the DAI stablecoin, which was the biggest at the time, perhaps still one of the largest out there in terms of just being a decentralized stablecoin, it had a problem. It broke. The Oracle didn't give enough information correctly to the layer one, and then the project started falling apart. And they were able to recover, but only because a bunch of VCs came in and backstopped the entire ordeal. And so what you see here is, again, more people in the meat space have to come and fix these decentralized systems because there isn't a perfect solution out there yet. I don't think that's a reason to jeer at these people, though, because it could be really useful. I don't want to spend my Bitcoin, but I'd love to spend an asset that runs on top of Bitcoin and has a lot of the properties that Bitcoin does have. A lot of Bitcoin maximalists and other people out there like to jeer at these and be like, oh, these are stupid projects, but they're not. They'd be very, very useful, and people would use them. It would be great to have a dollar that has different properties than the dollar my bank account does, that can't be seized by people, that's censorship resistant, that's really cheap to move around. But today, we haven't seen that happen yet. David, I want to give it back to you.
Just two quick things, I guess. One, I think that it's important to clarify that the reason people jeer at this stuff is because on a theoretical level, at least according to certain arguments, they are doomed to fail from the very conception. I think I agree that in principle, it would be nice to have something like this, but, it's, again, skeptics would say that this is printing money from thin air and then hoping that it will maintain value because you're trading it against another money that you printed from thin air. And so if you, at that level, you can see why people might not think that it's viable. However, and the other thing that I wanted to add, though, Will, is that I think you kind of were getting there, but the reason this is interesting in that meat space crypto divide is that You don't have to have a bank account. You don't have to have an individual. You don't have to have anything that can be targeted by a government or other hostile actor if you have an algorithmic stablecoin. In theory, it's entirely decentralized. And that's really the reason people are chasing this goal, although I'm sure the alpha from printing your own money is pretty attractive too. So I wanted to just point out those two points.
I was going to ask a question, David. You kind of answered it, and Will, my audio cut out while you were talking, so I'm just going to ask it again. I think if you watch the hash from the beginning to now, you would just see my stablecoin journey. I'm still trying to wrap my head around how stablecoins can work in everyday life. And I think I understand normal stablecoins, right? We talk about trading, we can talk about remittances, we can talk about reducing risk. When it comes to algorithmic stablecoins, when I was reading that Wall Street Journal piece, it was all about risk and uncertainty, and these are unstable, stable coins. Can you guys help me understand the story here? Why should we care about algorithmic stablecoins? Why is this such a big story? And why maybe is the Wall Street Journal piece a little bit one-sided? Or is it?
Give it to Zach. I want to hear his take on it.
Oh boy. My take on. All right, do it again. What's the question, Jen? There's still a question to it.
What's the story? What's the story here around algorithmic stablecoins?
I'll tell you the story. All right,
okay,
so I think the story is you could call these decentralized stablecoins, right? Stablecoin layer with USDT and USDC. A lot of censorship risk in that layer, right? These are projects that ostensibly have dollars in a bank somewhere, operated by known entities that can be shut down on a whim, according to any old government, right? So I think, hardcore crypto adherents are like, why are we building in this like censorship prone stablecoin layer into decentralized finance? Like, isn't that kind of like defeat the whole purpose of the thing? So in comes Do Kwon, in comes Rune Christensen of MakerDAO, and they say, hey, let's make a stablecoin through various crypto economic dynamics that escapes that censorship risk reality that is sort of existential to USDC and USDT, right? The market doesn't seem to care. The market values USDC and USDT. Those are the two big dogs. But now all of a sudden you have, hey, a decentralized stablecoin that can exist in decentralized finance in a way that escapes some of the possibilities for censoring these transactions on the blockchain. Mm-hmm. I think that's it. I don't know. Did that make sense, David?
That makes sense.
That's the dream. But again, the dynamics are hard, and sometimes it goes wrong. And that's just why we're here covering this thing day in, day out. It's never not interesting.
But I also, okay, sorry, Zach, but I have to hit you. It's not just hard. It's maybe probably impossible, just according to the laws of monetary physics. So that's why this is so interesting to me, is that this is, people criticize it as trying to invent a financial perpetual motion machine, or, like that's the equivalent in physics. Maybe it'll last for a while. Maybe the theorists are wrong. But there are some really strong arguments that this will literally never happen. And that as long as a coin like UST manages to appear stable, it's temporary. And that's where the systemic risk arguments and discussions become important.
It's truly the best. Time will tell. The ultimate cop-out. Time will tell. But this is a great one. This is a great time will tell if this system can stand up.
And in the meantime, we get to argue about it. So it's just a win-win-win.
That's right. It's perfect. Win-win all around.